I want to now, in the interest of time, move on to the next panel. So thank you to our YJA panel, and thank you to Ankit Desai, actually, who was instrumental in organizing that panel for us behind the scenes, and for all of your wonderful participation. So next up, we're going now to young Jain professionals, and this is the YJP Roundtable. I'm going to mix it up a little bit here, and we have here Beyond Right and Wrong, Applying Anekāntavāda in Modern Workplaces. So let's take it into the workplace. We're very lucky to have Dr. Arpit Mehta as our presider. And I say that for many reasons, but I'll just note that Dr. Mehta is an advisory board member for Arihanta Institute and is also the CEO and co-founder of Data Intellect and director of bioinformatics at Northwell Health. As anyone who knows Arpit knows, he is a man wearing many hats, and the hat he's wearing today is our presider, and we're so grateful that you organized this roundtable for us, Dr. Mehta. So I welcome you to the stage, and I'll let you take it from here.
Perfect. Thank you, Chris. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, Jai Jirendra, everyone. I'm excited to proceed this panel. Let me see when you guys can see my screen. I'm going to share. So, hello everyone, Jai Jirendra once again. I'm Arpit, and today we are, kind of feeling very recognized and heard in terms of the voices from young Jain professionals coming in. Thank you, Arihanta Institute, for providing us this opportunity to talk about this topic and hear the perspectives. Now, throughout the conference, I believe you guys have heard about what Jainism says about Anekant, what are the different perspectives coming in from different angles into the place. But this session specifically, we will be talking about workspaces, right? How in professional life we deal with these scenarios which we don't even think whether Anekant applies to them or not. How do we different professionals handle these scenarios and go with understanding how they think and apply these values into those scenarios. So before I introduce the panelists, I want to ask you guys a question, and forgive my animation skills. I think they're a little off, but hopefully it gets the gist. So a question is more towards the audience. Let's say you propose an idea in a meeting and your manager rejects it immediately, no explanation given whatsoever. What is your immediate reaction? And I know the audience, maybe you guys can put your thoughts in chat or think about it, but idea is like really thought-provoking or trying to make you think that what happens when something like this happens. Our immediate reactions most of the time is it's not fair, it is not something which the manager considered my performance, or the way I'm proposing the idea is getting outright rejected. But there is more to it, right? So let's say layer one, our first reaction: manager is unfair, manager doesn't value you, manager is wrong. These are the things which comes in the mind. Then let's add another layer to it. The manager has already tried a similar idea last year and it failed. Now does your perspective change about the situation? Another team presented the same idea with data and it was approved before, already in process by some other team implementing. Now does your perspective change? Now, the full picture is that the manager was under pressure and didn't explain the full context, but a lot of information was available to them, not to us. And hence, there are perspectives which every situation has more facets than your first view reveals. So this is like how we are at workplaces navigating Anekant, right? We are understanding, even before making decisions or giving judgments, we want to understand what other perspectives lies on the table and how do we navigate them through. So with that, I want to introduce our panelist, Shanika Gandhi. She's the Chief Marketing Officer for Greenberg Lusker. She's the President-elect for LMA West Region, licensed attorney, former co-chair of YJP and Jain Connect. So a lot of hats as again with Shanika. Then we have Amit Lodha, Associate Director, AI ML, and then Amit is going to give us a perspective about AI and how do we navigate perspectives in AI. He builds AI products and multi-agent systems. applies Anekāntavāda to design AI that surfaces full context before solving. Then we have Priyanka Chodia. She's a good friend, founder of D-Deco Jewels. Also 7th generation jeweler. So imagine generations into the jewelry trade, applies multiple perspective thinking to build lasting trust with clients. So again, business oriented, dealing with clients day to day, handling a lot of perspective. And then we have Manan Mehta. He's the risk consultant at EY and also a doctoral candidate. So coming from the law and risk analysis. He's current co-chair of Young Jain Professionals. So here is our panel. So what I want to do is kind of ask a very common, or a simple question to our panelists today. And Priyanka, I'll ask you first, going with you, and I'll randomly select from the panelist how it goes. Before that, I want to give you a rundown, audience, that we're gonna have perspectives come from individual panelists first. Then we'll go into discussing more common questions and how our panelist feels about it. Feel free to comment, feel free to talk or chat or raise questions in between. As they are speaking, I'll read through the chat and understand if there are some questions which I want to bring earlier, we'll do that. Towards the end of the panel, what we'll do is we'll take all of those questions and scenarios and anything which you guys think you need help on in terms of navigating a particular scenario, or how should I acted in a certain situation. We will discuss that. And we'll take some more scenarios to see how we can make it more thought-provoking. So with that, I want to start with Priyanka. Here's her slide. So Priyanka, go ahead.
Sure. Jai Janendra, everyone. Thank you so much, Arpit, and everyone for having me on the panel. As Arpit gave an introduction on myself, being in the jewelry business, 7 generations, it's a family business. So you can imagine a lot of perspectives, a lot of decision-making day to day, different generations. So how do I really handle that? And jewelry itself, it's really about it's one piece of jewelry, but it really is viewed by so many different perspectives. So I'll get into that.
And Priyanka, you can prompt me if you want slide change. So I'm going to there we go.
Thank you. Okay, so as everyone knows, like jewelry it's one piece of jewelry. It could be a necklace or studs or anything, but there's so many different interpretations. It can be either celebrating a milestone, it can be a promise, like an engagement ring, wedding band. It can be something that's legacy that's passed down generation, or just a self-accomplishment piece. So just that one piece of jewelry has so many different perspectives. Just being any piece that it means so many different things to different people. And that I think is really interesting because usually everyone has like their own interpretation of why they want to buy it or what they want to do with the piece of jewelry. And as being in the industry, I need to understand that there's not just one thing that I can define. The customer decides and defines what the piece means. Next slide, please. So now going to the customer and the culture, it's really important to just listen and not assume. Jewelry is bought because of cultural things. Being Indian, there's so many things that our parents want to preserve. It can be a very emotional thing, and different stages in life. You want to celebrate different chapters, different journeys. So really, to each one's own, why they want to commemorate a specific milestone in life, or just as is. Just to buy, to just have. So just to understand why the customer wants to do that. Next slide. And then another aspect of being in the jewelry industry, separate from actually the piece, is just so many hands that it actually physically goes through while actually being received or bought by the customer. So first, it's designer who sees the creativity, then the manufacturer who looks at the craftsmanship. How is this made? How is this going to actually wear and sit on the client? Then it's the wholesaler who sees the market. Where can I sell this? The retailer who then makes the story. And then it comes to the customer who then applies it to their meaning and emotion. So just going through the whole chain, there's so many different perspectives because the designer is thinking about their things and the customer is thinking about what they want. So just in the whole process, it's so important to actually understand what is the piece being made for? And me being a manufacturer and a wholesaler, it's really interesting to kind of figure that out, and to kind of then work with the designer or the retailer to make tweaks into what I have. Next slide, please. Yeah. So how do I apply Anekāntavāda to my business? It's really important that I need to listen and not assume, and just remember that every perspective matters. Being in sales, I can't be pushy and being like, "Oh, you need to get this," or "You need to. This is why I think this is good." I can always give my opinion, but I never like to superimpose this either, because that also doesn't create comfort with the client. I always give suggestions, but it's really important for me to make sure that I listen to my client and understand what they actually want rather than being pushy. And in the long run, that's what has led to our family business continue for so many generations, is because we understand the client and not just focus on how we want to grow, because with understanding our client's perspective brings our own company's growth naturally.
Perfect. Thank you,
Yes.
Brekka. That was wonderful. And I think, two takeaways straight up is, when I go to a store or a jewelry store, and buying something for my family, never think about how many perspectives, how many hands that product have, gone through. And think about, like, sometimes you're like very critical of certain things, like, oh, this doesn't look this way, and the finishing was off and something like that. But thinking about what process it takes all the way from bringing it from raw material all the way to market, it changes the way, probably I'll walk into a store next time. Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So with that, Manan, I think, Manan is our young and inspiring leader from YJP. He is into earlier careers, and has a lot of leadership journey. So we'll hear from Manan what Anekant means for a young Jain like him.
Thank you, Jain there, everyone. Really appreciate you having me on the panel, Arpit, and thank you to Professor Miller for facilitating this. I'm just going to talk a little bit about, first off, how I apply Anekāntavāda in my personal life. I think that'll provide some context for how I apply it professionally. To me, Anekāntavāda is the willingness to recognize that reality is complex. No single viewpoint captures its entirety. I know it's a cliche and tired saying, but I think walking a mile in someone else's shoes is a great starting point for understanding Anekāntavāda. But I want to, build on that a little bit. Growing up, I was the kid who constantly asked why. Why are we doing things this way? Why do others do things differently? Why do we have to follow this rule? What's its significance? I'm sure I annoyed my parents to no end with that. They probably thought it was stubbornness or me trying to rebel, which maybe some of it was, but a lot of it was also rooted in a curiosity to understand context. Today, I still constantly ask why, which I'm sure still annoys the people around me, but you know, Anekāntavāda shows up for me in the way that I try and understand people. Let's say someone's angry. I don't immediately dismiss it or label them as unreasonable. I try and understand, why are they feeling this way? What experiences have shaped this reaction? Are there certain values that they're trying to protect? Or, maybe they're trying to protect their ego's getting involved in some way. And I think that shift from judgment to inquiry is important. And, that's sort of how you take a mature perspective in situations of conflict, and it can apply to other situations too, not just if someone's angry, but any other emotions that you may come across. In addition to that curiosity to understand context, there's a fundamental realization that as you get older, you become more stubborn and set in your ways, unfortunately, right? And part of growing up is realizing you're not going to necessarily meaningfully change people, but you can choose how deeply you understand them. Next slide, please. So I've experienced this personally, within my own family. Some of my relatives, close relatives, are deeply rooted in the Digambar Jain tradition, and they actually won't step foot in a Shwetambar Janale because they believe that adornments on the murtis compromise the spiritual purity. A few years ago, I was with my immediate and extended family. We were in Rajasthan. We got to visit Dilwara Temple in Mount Abu and Ranakpur Jain Temple. These are both over 500 years old with hundreds of hand-carved columns that are each unique. The craftsmanship is intricate, it's exquisite, it's a sight to behold. Highly recommend you visit. These are some photos from the trip. But the devout Digambar Jains in our family chose to stay outside. And from my perspective, their lack of Anekāntavāda meant missing out on the extraordinary beauty and the history of the hand-carved pillars inside. But at the same time, I understood for them that from their perspective, there's only one true path grounded in Samyak Gyan and Samyak Darshan. Anything that deviated from that, again, felt like a dilution of their faith, right? So for me, Anekāntavāda, it's not forcing agreement, but it's also not abandoning your own values. I think, you're holding space for multiple truths, right? That's sort of the dictionary definition of Anekāntavāda. I'm not going to always adopt someone else's worldview, but I shouldn't be so rigid in my own views that I refuse to understand why they hold that perspective in the first place. You want to listen without becoming defensive, and you want to disagree respectfully. And those are applications of Anekāntavāda that translate over to the professional sphere very well. And understanding someone is not the same as endorsing everything they believe. Next slide, please. One other great example is, you look at politicians, you may not agree with everything a given politician says, but you can understand it's good to take a step back and truly understand why is that person so popular and why are they so well liked. And I think, there's a balance you can strike. That's one real world example there. So that's sort of how I apply Anekāntavāda in my day-to-day life.
That's amazing. Thank you, Manan. And again, great perspective, especially about the part where, within Jainism, there are multiple facets of truth, right? And truth is never, always open to everybody. And one analogy I always try to give when I'm, talking to youngsters in Pathshala, etc., is think of it as a gaming map, right? A lot of time you're in a gaming scenario and you're playing like Age of Empires or other places where you're building farms, you're building factories, etc. The map is clouded, right? It's always you're in one place and you're starting from level 1, but everything else is shrouded in like a dark gray space, right? As you walk through those levels, those areas become open and the truth becomes more prominent to you, and you think that, oh, instead of going from this A to B via this route, I would actually taken a shortcut and gone from here because that map was open. But since it wasn't in the beginning, we took the long cut to get there. So Anekānt is actually truth shrouded in different perspectives, right? And as you grow, as you explore these truths more and more, you realize that a lot of this map area opens up, and you start to see the complete, if not complete, and I think like Tirthankar's probably achieved the complete truth picture. We will be infinitely far from them as we grow towards our journey in nirvana and moksha. But as you realize more and more truth, suddenly the space doesn't seem so conflicting. It doesn't seem like things are with opposite perspectives, right? So with that, I want to also introduce Shrenika. I mean, I already did, but Shrenika, why don't you tell us what is your definition of Anekānt?
Yeah, thank you for having me, Arpit, and to Arihanta Institute for thinking of me for this. This is exciting, and it actually just prepping for this panel has really, expanded my different perspectives on Anekāntavāda. I think my journey with Anekāntavāda has started really in my childhood because my dad is Jain, but my mom is Hindu. So I grew up with two different religions and getting exposure to both. And then later on in my childhood into basically when I was in law school, then exploring Jainism more. And so that to me has really grounded me in this ability to do a lot of listening. I think that's like the key component to how I apply Anekāntavāda in my personal and workspace, in my work, because I think listening to other views is critical to my success in the workplace. If I'm not understanding where and the reason is because I have so many stakeholders, especially in the type of work that I do. I work at a law firm. I'm the chief marketing officer, which means I have to manage, it's a partnership structure, right? So that means I have essentially 40 bosses. Even though there's a managing partner, I have all these perspectives who, they have opinions on the way that where we should market, where we should spend our time, where we should spend the money, right? Because it's their money. And so it's really critical for me to keep an open door policy, for me to listen intently about the way that that they want to position themselves in the marketplace, but also read between the lines, because sometimes they don't tell me exactly why, and I have to ask leading questions to be able to figure out where are they coming from, why do they feel this way. And of course, like, then I have my own opinion, right? It's my job as the lead in marketing to sort of guide this ship to where we're trying to go. And so a lot of where my viewpoints come from is sort of, I tolerate others' opinions, and I'm ingesting all of these opinions, and I have to come to a part of the challenge of Anekāntavāda is, you can hold all of these truths, but in a modern workplace, you have to make decisions, right? You can't just sit in all these different perspectives. You have to be able to, synthesize that and come up with the decision and move forward. So I think a lot of that is what I struggle with in terms of, okay, I'm going to get all these opinions, but at the end of the day, I have to make a decision, and some people are going to be happy and maybe others not. So I really liked how Manan said reality is like complex. I think that is so true, because it's no single perspective is right or wrong, and everyone who comes to me, it's their worldview. But in I have to be able to take those perspectives and then also give mine, right? And say, from my experience, or using data to say this is what has worked and what has not worked. Then this also translates into not just the attorneys I work with, but I manage a team too. So I have 5 people that I manage who all are in different stages of their careers. So not only am I influencing their careers, but they're also coming back to me and giving me their opinions and thoughts. And so it's been really interesting to be able to check myself almost at the door and be like, I have the opinion, right? It's my decision making, but at the same time, they see things that I don't see every day, right? They see practical implications of, it could be as simple as we're, designing a new PowerPoint design, because I'll talk about this later. We went through a website and brand refresh, right? That's a pretty typical project in marketing. And that involves a lot of different opinions about design and what will work for the market and what will work for our firm. And of course, people on my team had different opinions on the way that we implemented that. And so having to keep a real open mind into, okay, I'm balancing design with practicality. That was really, me practicing Anekāntavāda to as much as I can, because I have to keep that open mind. And then on a personal level, I think one of the big ways that I have to really keep Anekāntavāda top of mind for me is raising a family. And so I have been married for 9.5 years. It'll be 10 years in December. And I have almost 4-year-old, and I am now growing a child too. So I'm expecting in September. And so this is like, having, thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So, having everyone's different, even raising a child, right? We each come with it from a different perspective. But we have to make one single decision to be able to then raise our child and give them the values that we want. I think that, and of course, it's not just me and my husband, it's also my parents and his parents, and, everybody's giving their opinions, and being able to take that respectfully and not get angry about it and not get worked up about it, and just say, everyone has their opinions, but at the end of the day, it's my values and my choice and how we want to do it, right? So I think if anything, Anekāntavāda to me has really been about listening and really understanding and putting myself in someone else's mindset, but at the same time having boundaries too, right? Of I can't I can't keep everyone's truths. I can listen to them and I can think about them and I can have them influence me and if I want it to. But at the end of the day, I have to use my intuition and my gut to decide what I think is important. So that's just a little bit about my the workspace and family and how I think about Anekāntavāda.
Thank you, Shanika. That was wonderful. I think you touched upon all the aspects of, and workplace is not just about business or being in your office. It starts at home. You wake up at your home, then you prep for the
Yeah.
day. You have family. You have so many interactions. You finish the work. You have to go back to a lot of things where also you're making decisions. We make decisions, starting as soon as we wake up all the way till we get to bed, and probably in dreams also we're doing the same thing. So it was important point you touched, that how do you respond to it without reacting to it, right? Like, so
Yeah.
essentially the situations are coming left and right. You have also perspectives in religion, right? Like having a Hindu household or family, one family from that side, one from Jain, conflicting perspectives sometimes, and practices as well. So it's very important what you said, to respond to it, do what you actually feel like, or in a respectful way do, and not react to them or proving their perspective wrong. So thank you. That was wonderful. So with that, I want to bring all of our audience's attention to AI, artificial intelligence, right? I was very curious when ChatGPT came to be, and started interacting. And one question was always in my mind: is AI conscious, right? Is it like, or is it eventually going to be conscious? I used to ask questions which were coming from more Jain lens of mine. Is like, oh, do you observe yourself? Do you have the ability to watch your own actions? And I'll ask the questions to AI, and then AI will say, yes, I do observe my actions. And then I'm like, which one is real you? Is it the observer or the observed? And then it will go into like some theoretical concepts, and then I'm like, oh yeah, maybe it has cleared the Turing test, which is a test of whether its computer can act as human or not, but it hasn't come and passed the Jain test yet. But with that, I want to introduce Amit. Amit is an AI expert in our panel, and I wanted to especially bring this perspective in because a lot of times when we are talking about scholarly senses, we talk about what our great leaders from the past have told about Anekānt. But now we are facing something new, which probably was not existing before. So how do we navigate Anekānt, and how do we shape up this revolution of AI and machine learning coming into? Let's talk with Amit on this topic. Amit, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you for the intro, Arpit. Thank you to everyone who organized this. I'm super excited to talk about this topic. My name is Amit Lota. I work for a company called Block Renovation. And Block Renovation is a marketplace between homeowners and contractors. If you want to renovate your home, you come to us, we link you with the contractor, and we help you manage the project. Now, at Block, one of the things we're trying to do is build all these AI agents to help both sides of the market. So think we have agents that help you design, help you price, help you come up with like an estimate, maybe work through kind of your questions. But we also have agents helping the contractor manage their projects, kind of like keep track of all the things they might have to buy and with their homeowners. But we're also working on agents that kind of work in the middle. And so if we're a marketplace, how can we buy agents that represent both sides of the market and not be biased? This is a big question for us. And so today I want to talk about how I use Anekānt to not only build a robust AI system, but get the AI to apply Anekānt in working with all our stakeholders. So yeah, let's begin. Next slide, please.
Yes, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but this is a very, very important point because a lot of time our lives are being shaped by AI these days, and I think how the systems are trained and what values are used to train that system. Now we're seeing the results of it. Like you're seeing AIs which are called evil AIs because you never build the guardrails for them. So Amit, thank you for this, and I'll move to the next slide. Sorry for the shameless plug-in about AI, but let's go.
No problem. That's just another perspective, Arpit, so I appreciate it.
Yes.
So first step is the data or the context that goes into the AI prompt. AI, as you said, has bias. And so it's very important for us to give all the pieces and facts of information to the AI so it knows how to interpret that information. So one of the things we do very carefully is the information intake. Now, we know that if you've ever done a renovation in your home, contractors have a very different way of talking than us and then everyone else. They're fast, they're vulgar, they can say a lot of stuff. Homeowners don't really know how to describe what they want. I think Priyanka mentioned about jewelry. There's many reasons someone wants to do a renovation, from emotional to logical to investment, etc., but they might not know how to describe it. And we need to take both sides and really make sure that the other side understands. And the only way to do that is building context, taking what the person said, and then using our own kind of multi-perspective surveying to figure out what those reasons might be, what those conditions might be, what the user might be saying, and putting it in different ways so that our AI doesn't have to guess and make interpretations from what the user is saying. Next slide, please. Now, the second is two parts here. Now, we have to use an LLM. The LLM has bias. How do we evaluate whether the LLM is good or not? And the second is, when I build my prompts, how do I make sure that the LLM is not just, hallucinating, not just spitting out information or not using its bias? To both, I'll say the same thing, that an LLM has all the information inside of it. Your job, your prompt's job, is to get that information out. So the LLM has both sides of the coin, but you have to prompt it in such a way that you need to take it out. And for that, if you read a lot of prompting techniques, a lot of them are just Anekāntavāda in principle. So for example, there's a technique called tree of thoughts and chain of thoughts. Going back to Arpit's original slide where he had the layers, he started with the question, added layer 1, layer 2, layer 3. So if you were building an AI system, you would have the question, and you have prompt 1, prompt 2, prompt 3, all building off of the previous response. By adding those layers, that's how you get a very well-rounded answer and multiple perspectives all coming into one thing. And so it's not the AI's job to make a decision, it's the AI's job to just go through its memory bank, pull out all the information for someone else to make the decision. This is also how we, yeah. There's also another prompting technique, and this is how we actually assess what the AI's bias is. We constantly ask it questions from different ways. That's how we know when a new model comes out, what might be good about that model, what might be bad. And one of the questions I love to ask any LLM or any AI application like ChatGPT, Claude, or whatever, tell me when I'm wrong. No matter what I'm working on, I'll have a conversation, and then at the end, always ask, you are allowed to tell me I'm wrong. Use it as a learning opportunity and tell me where I'm wrong. You'll see the answers that if you start applying that to your workflows, you'll see like how much better the responses are and how good the AI gets at kind of understanding the full picture of what you're trying to get at. Next slide, please. Okay, so now by putting these two together, that's how we create this marketplace that can handle multiple truths at once. When there's a delay in a project, a homeowner is going to blame the contractor like this is like a real pain. The contractor is going to say, no, my office messed up, or the materials didn't come in, or another tariff came in and now all of a sudden prices are crazy high. We need to balance all of that. And by having this system that can, one, take in all the information, two, ask multiple layers of it, and then process that information in such a way, that's how we create this balanced marketplace and make sure that no one is wrong, no one is right, that we're representing both sides equally or as fairly as possible. But again, that's very theoretical. So the fourth slide, next slide, please, is how do we evaluate our AI? And when you're in the AI world, you're going to hear about evals, which basically means all my stakeholders, all my bosses, they're all asking the same question. How do we know that this is right? Well, if a homeowner is telling you this emotional thing, is there really a right or wrong answer? And so one of the things I always say is, you can't know if an AI is right or wrong, but there's multiple ways to be right. It's multiple ways to be wrong. And our job is to figure out all of them. And so we built an eval system that actually takes all the conversations that come. We ask multiple questions in different perspectives of that conversation to get a full view of how well that conversation went. So we ask things like, was the user frustrated? Was the user repetitive? If the user was repetitive, why was he repetitive? If the user, if this was the information, did the user accurately reflect the information? Did the AI accurately reflect the information? All these questions come together to tell us, hey, your AI is working good or bad. And the answer can be both. There are times when the AI is working great and times when it's working really bad, and it can happen at the same time. But because we have all the answers available, that's how we can really tell, all right, this is where we need to work on, this is what we need to do, and this is where our AI is going wrong. So yeah, that's it, and happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Amit. That was, again, wonderful. And I think, You explained it really, although I have some, information or, background in AI, but I want to ask other panelists who don't. Do you think that he simplified it good enough for you guys to understand how AI works? Because that's again, like sometimes because we're working in those slides. So I wanted to see what do you think about what Amit just presented? Shanika, go ahead.
Sorry,
Yeah.
oh, sorry, it was a little hard to hear. Can you repeat that?
Oh yeah, so I was just throwing it out like this was a great perspective which Amit discussed, and because we both are from technical background, we wanted to understand what were your reactions on this, thinking about thinking in perspectives in AI.
Yeah, no, I guess what really resonated the most with me was the asking the AI after all of this, like, where am I wrong? Because I don't think about like, oh, okay, like that the AI might just be telling me what I want to hear, right? And so you don't think about like, oh, I should ask for, and this is also in person too, right? Like when you're running meetings, like to ask like give me like what they call the devil's advocate, perspective. Like what's the other side? What am I not thinking of? So I appreciated that reminder.
Well, great. So thank you, Amit. I think this was wonderful. Let me stop sharing. So now we'll jump into like more panel style discussions, take some topics around and also look into, aspects which are, beyond workplace as well. So let me just stop sharing 1 second. All right, there we go. So, when we talk about perspectives, I always had a thought that, where does it actually begin? And being into computational biology and biology itself, I think the cells, like when they make copies of themselves from the very beginning, there are two different perspectives which get added, which is like a mother's, DNA, which is a whole lot of memories and generations of learnings from one side of the family and other side of the family. Now it comes together and makes an individual who is already different than the mother and the father because the perspective is different to begin with. So at the very beginning of inception, the differences start to appear, right? And then as cells divide, replicate, there are some errors, some mutations get added here and there. And then eventually it becomes a very complex system of its own, our biology. And then that's the genetics part of it. Now we talk about epigenetics, where the kid is born and he's growing with different perspectives, sometimes different multi-faith parents, sometimes different perspectives about the foods, lifestyle habits, etc. All of these things coming together into it. So we have some new parents, on the panel, Shanika and Priyanka, and then, I wanted to hear from you guys, what do you think about, the journey of parenthood? And coming from that into like raising your kids, how do you guys navigate, and where is Anekānt coming into this? Priyanka, you can go. Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, it's just for context. So Amit and I just became parents, and we have a 3-month-old. And Shanika, as you had mentioned earlier, like having different perspectives, even within your like parents, grandparents, the both of us, like that's definitely a really big challenge because every single person, even if it's me and my brother, same parents, we have completely different perspectives on everything. So how do you manage that? I did want to start off by saying that I think motherhood has been the biggest eye-opening journey for me throughout pregnancy and becoming a mom, because I feel like I truly have learned to not judge anyone anymore. Because I would always, like, to be very honest, I would see other parents and I'm like, oh, when I'm a mom, I'm not gonna do that, or I'm gonna do this. I think it's so easy to say, and I'm sure when other people look at me parenting, they're like, oh, why is she doing this, or why is she doing that? I think it's really important to like come above that, also kind of just like to not care about things, but also just to like for me to understand different perspectives of why, like, this person is doing X for a reason. So instead of that, just help and support and help each other grow. And I think that's really helped me look at motherhood in a completely different perspective. And then one like little story I wanted to share was when I was about to like go into labor, my mom kept on saying like, like your son is gonna go through so much. And I'm like, Mom, like I'm going through labor, and like, you're thinking about like my baby right now, like, can you give me some consolation? And that actually really made me think about it, because I was like, like we always think about like, okay, the mom is going to go through much, like obviously our body's going through it, but like no one thinks about like what the baby's going through. Like he's also in so much distress, like coming out, crying, and all these things. And I think when she mentioned that to me, it really helped me make better decisions day to day as a parent, because that made me realize that when he's crying, I'm like, oh, like I have to wake up at 2 in the morning, but I also have to understand that he's the one crying too. He's the one that needs something. So I feel like once I changed my perspective on that, it really made things a lot easier to understand that like how the journey is not just me and Amit understanding our son. It's about him also understanding like being out of the womb and understanding what to do. And then another thing I wanted to mention was just working moms. First of all, every single mom is working. So I really would like to change the label of housewife to like homemaker, because I think like being a mom is actually equivalent to two full-time jobs. It's a job that is super rewarding, but never ends. It's not a 9 to 5. It's forever. So I think like that's something that I definitely have learned, to just kind of have a different perspective on that, and to just have a completely different lens on how parents are managing professionally and even home, all these different perspectives.
That's great. Thank you, Priyanka. That was, I mean, I can never think of it, obviously, being being in this situation. What about you, Shanika? Tell me, what do you think? Add some perspective to
Yeah.
that. Yes.
No, I think parenthood, and this is, I ditto everything that Priyanka said, but I think it has taught me a lot about patience. And I think patience really leads, you need that to really practice Anekāntavāda, because if you're not, if you're just, because you may be listening to someone's perspective, but if you're already making judgments already in your brain about how, what they're saying, right? That's not, Anekāntavāda's kind of going the other way. So what I have learned is, just patience with everyone around me, patience with myself, trying to, navigate this new world that I didn't, parenthood is new and I had no idea what I was doing. And so I had to, figure it out as I was going. I think one story is of, with my son, he's also like very curious and asks a lot of questions. And I've found that, it's easy to get frustrated, but if I allow him to, if I keep asking questions of like, well, why do you feel that way? And, use your words to explain to me like what's going on. He starts to be able to explain his perspective, and then I understand, okay, like this is what's really happening, right? And why you feel this way. And so I think that actually translates so well to the workplace too. Like if we are not asking enough questions and we're just jumping to conclusions, or we think that our strategy is right and we're not taking in all of these different viewpoints, we're not, we're not going to have the full picture to make the best decisions, and that definitely leads to frustration. And so it has, I am the balance. I'm like learning a lot from like a 4-year-old about patience and like explaining your feelings and how important that is to determining like, why someone feels that way, and how that shapes their mindset. Um, and the working mom thing, we could have a whole panel on that because I feel like it has been the most challenging thing for me, because I am a workaholic. I love what I do. I love my job. I'm so passionate about it. And then having to take a break from that for leave, and then come back and try to pick up again, but also pick up in a different way where I want to spend the mornings with Kavir, and I block off like 5 to 8 so that I could have dinner time and bedtime. But then I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning so I can work, and then sometimes at night I have to stay up. And so it's like the balance of it all is difficult. And you have, part of that is I now, knowing that, treat others in my firm differently about what they can handle and what they can't handle, right? Because people are just coming at they have different things going on in their lives, right? They might not be parents, but they might have elderly parents, or they might have, family members, or their own self-help issues, let's say. People are coming into the workplace with such different walks of life that you start to open your mind a little bit more about what are people actually dealing with when they're coming to the workplace, and to giving them some grace.
Wonderful. Thank you, Shanika and Priyanka. So, Manan, I think next task for us should be from YJP. We should be making young Jain moms and young Jain parents, I guess. This is a need of the hour. We should think about making a group where, we have so many young parents coming in, especially like, in Jaina, when we talk about there's idea of like people come to the temples till they're in colleges, etc. They go into parenthood and they disappear. Maybe it's a platform which we can build to bring all of them together, as a group, and then support each other. I think that would be great support help group. So thank you, ladies. So Manan, coming to you, and as I talk about YJP and leadership, right? You've been a tremendous leader for YJP for past years. We've seen a lot of great activities going with YJP. So tell us, like, do you face at the leadership level, when you're taking certain decisions, it is sometimes you don't even have time to explain the perspective. Sometimes you have to execute. Sometimes you get into situations where to choose between your emotions or what's practical at that situations. So I want to ask you, like, how do you navigate these leadership challenges and great decisions using Anekānt?
No, it's a great question. I can just provide a little bit of background. So I joined Young Jain Professionals in 2024, joined the board in 2024. I'd been attending some events in and around the New York area, and that was just sort of rooted in a desire to connect more deeply with the community. I had moved to the city in 2022, got to meet Priyanka and Amit, then Arpit through Young Jain Professionals, Shanika as well. So no, the community's been tremendous, and after at a certain point, I found myself in the role of co-chair, tasked with actually leading the organization. And we now have a team of over 50 active volunteers. We've hosted large professional and social events, hundreds of attendees. Running even a small nonprofit like YJP requires extreme coordination. In many ways, I would say it's more difficult than my corporate job because no one's getting paid. So the incentive structures are totally different. And without Anekāntavāda, an organization like YJP can't function. Everyone's coming from different backgrounds, different professional experiences, different Jain sects. People's personalities are different. The time commitments that they can offer are very different. And everyone has their opinion, right? With those opinions comes friction. I've been part of boards in the past that completely stall because discussions just turn into ego battles rather than actual problem solving sessions. I would say Anekāntavāda's taught me a lot about how to be a great leader. I tell Arpit this all the time, that YJP has been the best leadership development program I could have ever signed up for. I think it's a course that money couldn't buy. Your job, I've learned that sort of your job as a leader, it's not to be the smartest person in the room. Most of the time, I'm actually not. Your job is to synthesize and align the perspectives from your team. And when I'm on a meeting with my team, I always remind myself, we hand selected these people because we trust their judgment. And so when I'm hearing something I disagree with, I do my best to, you put your ego to the side and say, I may not have the full picture. This perspective is worth listening to. We've had situations where team members are in complete disagreement. I'll give you an example. We're working to plan our 2026 convention this year in October, and we're trying to decide on a theme and a brand kit, and everyone has their own opinion on what the theme should be. I'll suggest one thing and everyone will be like, no, absolutely not. And then someone else will suggest something else, and it's the same thing. In these situations, I've learned that it's the best practice is you listen actively to what everyone has to say and you restate each person's position. You want to make people feel heard, because I think that's half the battle. Like, truly, not everyone's looking to have their opinion come out on top necessarily. Everyone just wants to feel heard. Sometimes I have to be the bad guy in the sense that, like, we can't have 7 different themes. We can only have one theme. So a decision has to be made. The key to, I think, running the organization successfully and not getting bogged down in those ego battles and debates is that you just make everyone feel heard and valued, even if we don't ultimately take their decision. Because, everyone on the team is, their judgment is trusted and valued. We all come with incomplete information. We all come with opinions from our lived experiences, and these are sincerely held beliefs. But, the purpose is not to debate to win. It's to, I think, have productive discussion to help us reach that collective vision, that collective goal. So those are some of the things YJP has taught me. And even though sort of at work, I'm kind of on the lower end of the totem pole, leading an organization like YJP, I think has really set me up for, and, given me a lot of the tools to be a great leader.
Amazing. Thank you, Manan. Moving from the leadership style, or how leadership is navigated through Anekant, Amit and Priyanka, I want to ask you a question, and it's more in the direction where work-life balance lies, right? Like, so coming from being at work all the time now, Amit, you're a new father as well. For what has changed for you since that happened, and how do you navigate your marriage, your work, and now the baby, coming into the world?
I think Priyanka and Shanika both said something very interesting. Shanika talked about balance. And for me, I didn't understand balance before I had our baby. I didn't understand that balance because what happened was every parent talked about, oh, having a kid is like the most happiest time, and that perspective didn't make sense. How can that be, right? Now I have a child, I understand that, and now I have something to weigh all my decisions against. That, like, this is what makes me truly happy. Now I have work, I have all these professional decisions I have to make. How does this compare to how much more value does this add to my life compared to something that I can ground my decisions against? That for me is having a child has really changed how I look at everything in the world, from like my social relationships, my professional relationships, my decisions that I make in life. And similarly, like I think Priyanka, when we talk about, like, now that we have like kind of like a common goal to raise this child as the best way possible. We're not just a couple anymore. We're a team. And now again, like all our decisions are based off of like what is the best thing for the three of us. But Priyanka also mentioned that like our baby also has a perspective that we have to account for too. A lot of times I think parents, like, we think about, like, we think this is what's best for our son. We don't know. We don't know what's truly best for him. We don't know what he's thinking. It's our job to like think for him. He's new to this world. He's understanding all this stuff for the first time. We have to kind of imagine what that must be like for us and make our decisions around that. So yeah, I think like really the name of the game is like the way I approach balance and decisions has completely changed.
Awesome. Priyanka, you want to add to that?
Yes, well said. And I just want to add that I think before I was like, when I was pregnant, I was like, oh, like the second he gets his vaccines, I'm going to start working and I'm just going to get right back into it. And I think I realized how having a baby really makes life slow. And I think I really needed that, because being in New York, everything is like one after the other, and you're just like going, you're rushing, you're just chasing something, and which we have yet to figure out what we're chasing. But we're just always on the get-go. I think having a baby, I just feel like the first week I was like being someone who's so structured and being like, what did I do today? I thrive from being productive. And then the first week I was like, what did I do today? I changed 15 diapers and I finished feeding 10 bottles. Like, your entire schedule completely changes. So I think like that whole shift was so drastic, and it really made me realize like that sometimes we really need to like sit and just relax and breathe. And I think like seeing and then also understanding that like I'm 32 right now. If I spend like a few years making sure I put work on like the back seat, maybe continue later, it's such a small amount of time, but this time that I have with him is never going to come back. Like career can always come and go, and things it's never ending to chase things and chase your aspirations, because once I resume work, like then I'm back in the flow again. But this time that he needs right now is something that like only we can give him and that no one else can. So I think it's like really important to just kind of understand what we want as parents, and also understanding that like things that I thought I would do is not what's happening right now. Like I thought I would do this and I would do that, like, and I think that's been like really humbling thing for me and a really ego reducer, because we just like laugh it off. We're like, didn't we say we would do this, and we're totally not doing it. But then it's just like that just kind of teaches you to go with the flow. And that's been a really big learning experience for us, to kind of just like not be so headstrong and just kind of like take things as it comes. So that's like definitely been a really eye-opening experience for us. And I think once you kind of look at it that way, it's not stressful.
Wow.
I feel like we always think like, oh, we need to like go back and we need to like do these expectations. And I don't think we just have to really think about like the moment. And I think that's something that I've really taken away with that.
Awesome, Priyanka. Thank you, Amit and Priyanka. I think you know, with this kind of work-life balance approach, there are certain challenges which sometimes it's not about the solution. Sometimes it's kind of being present, being aware of the situation, and realizing that this is how the situation is. And you know, instead of maybe being critical to things, or the way it approached to that situation, we can think about what can be done next in a way that it can be avoided, or having created more space for others to listen in. So with that, Shanika, my question to you, I think you manage a big team as well. So not only you have like multiple bosses who are giving you prompts from different direction, you also have team members who needs to be conveyed this message. And sometimes hierarchy gets skipped. People are telling directly to a level which is like reporting to you, but technically your boss is saying something, and there's some confusion gets created. So how do you navigate all of this in the workplace? How do you use these principles to kind of bring that peace back and control back? Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I mean, I definitely feel where I have to spend a lot of time just s- using that patience that I said, to think, like, to be able to intake everything and then spend the time actually thinking about what makes sense. So in my role, it's a little bit, it's not marketing a product, right? I'm marketing the brains of an attorney, right? So it's their expertise, it's what they can do for our clients, it's the legal services that they provide. And so and what I do is a lot of not just marketing, but it's a business development and communications, right? So what ends up happening is every single attorney at our firm, the way that they go out there and to get clients is very different, right? One attorney may hate writing or speaking, but they rather just go to lunch and dinner to deepen relationships, right? And the other attorney might be the complete opposite. They're not really great at going into a big networking organization and trying to meet people, but instead they're so smart and deep in thinking, they want to write articles and show their expertise that way. And so what I have to do is I spend a lot of time coaching the attorneys about where they're coming from, and I'm not going to the table saying like, hey, this is what I think you should be doing. I have to instead ask them leading questions. I have to ask them, what is it that you like to do? What is it that you're passionate about? Do you like writing? Do you like networking? Do you like, what is it that you will feel most comfortable with? Because business development and marketing is scary, right? They're coming at it from a fear perspective. They don't know how to do that. They don't teach that in law school. And so I think what my job is to get them into a comfortable place, to ask them enough information, and then build my strategy around all of those different key points that they're giving me. And so that means that it's just a lot of intake of information, and then knowing what I think from my lived experience of like, I think this works best, but applying it to their worldview, right? I'm constantly doing that across, like, I have 115 lawyers that are always, at some point, they're asking for our help. so that's on the attorney perspective, right? Just that coaching that happens every day with me for practicing Anekāntavāda and not coming to the table with like, I think this is what you should do, but rather like really meeting strategy from where they want to come from, because that's how you build buy-in, and that's how you get them to do what we need them to do, which is go out there and bring in business, right? So then there's this whole perspective of like managing a team, right? And helping your team feel safe and comfortable, voicing their opinions to keep it simple. And I think I just went to a conference, the Legal Marketing Association, right? It's a conference of just all people in my position, legal marketers. And we talked a lot about when you're managing a team, creating this term called psychological safety, right? Having people feel comfortable voicing their opinions so that they don't feel dismissed, that they don't feel like they're saying something wrong, that they don't feel shut down. And that's really hard to do, because it's so easy for me to be like, no, that's not the right answer, or no, like that's not how we do it, or we've already done that before, but it's not going to work this time. So and this just happened to me last week. I had I had made a decision on something, and one of my team members came to me. She's like, hey, like, I really think, she's like, I think I'm here to state my case about why we think, the way this PowerPoint should be, because of, this is how it's practically applied. And so it was really hard for me to sit there and listen. Okay, I'm going to listen to what, clearly she's in the practical day-to-day usage, right? In the weeds of everything, because she's on my team just executing, and she's learning things that I had no visibility on. And so she's giving me these examples, and I was like, yeah, you know what? You're right. Like that makes a lot of sense. So what I thought was a design decision, actually practically that doesn't apply. And so that was really important for me. And I'm glad that she felt safe enough to come into my office and be like, I need to tell you something. And I try to do that as often as I can with my team. And that means that those who don't speak up in, like, if you have team meetings, for example, and you're finding, if you're leading the team, or if you're on the team and your boss is not creating this, this environment, it's important to try to find your own voice and try to find a place where you can feel like, you can share your opinion and do so in a comfortable way. And so and that could mean, asking, someone who's not speaking, like, hey, what do you think about this perspective? And if you haven't had time to think about it, that's okay. Why don't I follow up in 2 days and we could talk about it one-on-one, right? And so sometimes people don't feel comfortable in group settings. So can I offer, and I do one-on-one check-ins with my team too, so that they have like, that time with me to voice what they're thinking. And so it just managing a team requires a lot of Anekāntavāda, because they have so many different, viewpoints and viewpoints that they're supposed to have, right? Because I'm implementing strategy and they're executing. In their execution, they're being exposed to all this stuff that I'm not really seeing day to day. And so it's really important for me to extract out what they're seeing so that I can make the best decisions for their firm too. So yeah, that's a little bit about how I've seen it from a team perspective.
That are a lot of key takeaways. Navigating both sides of the coin. And then one important part, what I want to summarize your conversation was, learning to unlearn as well. Sometimes we are set in our ways so hard. Sometimes we have done things like day in and day out in routine clockwork. We forget to realize that the time has, there are things which are changing. There are practical applications which are changing. Coming from like top-down managers who have done things certain way, it has worked all the time, may not work this time. So in order to climb a bigger hill, we have to come downhill from the smaller one. In order to go at the top, or which is beyond the top what we are, we have to come down and start again on a bigger hill. And unlearning, or rewiring our brain networks in a way to understand the other perspective is so important. And Anekānt is not just a process which is kind of philosophical. Your brain actually responds to it. Your brain is actually firing neurons, like building new pathways, kind of breaking the old ones, saying that, hey, this was not true, let's break this connection and form new ones. And for our brain to go and evolve, I think these new neural connections are so important. So taking just this small pause before judging anything, taking one step back and thinking that, can there be any information which is why this perspective, although sounding like very opposite what I'm trying to say, but still makes sense. So thank you. That was very, very good. So Priyanka, coming to you on that perspective, you do a lot of marketing yourself. You're in sales. You're direct sales involved with with your clients. Is there any scenario you want to share where specifically a practical example where you're maybe making a sale or dealing with a customer or a supplier, and that helped you, or you realize that, hey, taking a pause and then unlearning is useful here?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is something that I deal with day to day. And I think preparing for this panel has really also put words to what I struggle with on a day-to-day basis too. So I think one of the things that happens is pretty real example. I mean, gold prices are so high right now. So everyone in the factory is let's just try to minimize the amount of gold that we're using, try to save on the cost, because that in terms of operations is the logical thing to do, right? How do we save money? Then I make the piece with less gold. I bring it to the show. The customer is like, is this even durable? Is this going to break? So in my head, I'm like, okay, well, what the manufacturer said was absolutely correct. How do we do that? But then the customer said that okay, well, they're concerned about durability. But then I provide them to the perspective that gold prices are high. So it's also really important for me to also justify why I'm doing what I'm doing. So I think that's something that I deal with a lot, is kind of try to understand or when I have a design and a customer is like, how come you chose to have this stone and not that stone? Everyone always wants to give their input and stuff like that. And I think that's when I need to be very transparent with the client and explain to them why I did what I did. And I think that's always been my approach, is to be very transparent and open in the workforce, because I feel that's the only way that I can actually close a sale. And for me, it's not even about closing the sale, it's about making the relationship and the connection. So I feel the more I understand their perspective, the easier it becomes for me to then explain why I did what, and then how it can help me actually make that relationship with the customer. And then I think another thing is also when a customer asks do you like this earring or that earring? And I'll help them decide. I always pick the one that I'll see other salespeople obviously going for the one that's more expensive. But I think what I always like to do is I genuinely try to give my own opinion. And I think that perspective really helps me build a long-term relationship. It's honesty in the moment is just so important to build that relationship. So I think my customers do appreciate that I'm not trying to get the extra buck, because for me, it's just long-term relationship that matters more. And that comes a long way.
Oh, that's awesome. Yes, honesty, and eventually Anekant, as I mentioned before, is the search for the truth. It's taking us towards more information towards your truth. And truth is infinite, but as we learn more and more perspectives and be honest about it, be at least truthful, stick to those values, the customer base grows. And I've seen that firsthand in my own, startup, with Unify. A lot of time customers are like, oh, we want this, and then can you do this? And I'm like, do you guys really, sometimes it's hard to convince the customer that they might not need that, and it is a heavy kind of price you're gonna pay, and then pivot from that back into something where, you'll be like, oh, this was a waste of time. But it is so hard to convey that, because one, that obviously I'm losing $200,000 on that contract, not telling them what they're looking for. So a lot of time people are like, let them buy whatever they want, man. I mean, we can't do it. But for me, it's kind of an ethical conundrum, right? How can I, let's say being a doctor, how can I let you have paracetamol? I mean, any medicine, whatever is going to you, it's going to cost you money. It's probably is just vitamins. It's not going to affect you at all, but it's no use to you. So it's important to understand that sticking to your own value system, your own honesty, your own judgments, which comes from Jain values of Anekant and Ahimsa, is important to implement. Because at the end of the day, we all think about it as a transaction, but these transactions make a network of transactions, which turns into a whole perspective around us, and including karma, what are you sending to the universe, what is coming back. All of this just zooms out into a 1,000-foot view of a lot of interactions compounding over time. important for you to stick to those values, and that's like kind of a takeaway message as well. At this point, I do want to see if audience, you guys have any questions, any scenarios, anything you guys feel like wanting to discuss with us. And I'll open the floor to audience to come in. So Chris, are there any questions coming in? If not, then we have a few other questions which I can take.
Yeah, thank you, Arpit, and thank you all. I've been listening here behind the scenes to your rich conversation based in so many years of not only professional but personal experience. I don't see any questions in the chat right now. I do again welcome if anybody else wants to ask about applying, Jain principles and especially of Anekāntavāda in the workplace. It would be much appreciated and enjoyed. I have been thinking and listening to this about other Jain principles as well. And I've also been thinking about the way that Jain principles have been discussed throughout this whole conference. And I know everybody's busy, so not everybody could be here for the entire event, which is totally understandable. But I'm just going to bring up some of the categories that maybe you all might want to reflect back on right now that we've gone through that crisscross with professional life. For example, the question of Anekāntavāda in politics. We talked about it a bit. Some of you may have seen it in our last panel that we had, and we're going to talk about it in the next panel. So it might be a good bridge. But politics, both work politics, but also politics in a kind of broad sense. How do you see Anekāntavāda from your perspective as operating in the very difficult world of politics that we live in now? I mean, we've kind of bounced off of it a little bit, but yeah, and not just politics, but any other categories that we've talked about. Interfaith dialogue. We've talked about speaking with other faiths. Yesterday, the whole day, we talked about different Dharma traditions interacting with one another. We talked about Dharma traditions interacting with Abrahamic traditions. And so we've really gone through so many different categories. This, of course, is the Young Jain Professionals panel, but you all interact with these different types of engagements with other perspectives every day. Do you want to say a little bit about how those show up in the workplace? And again, how they kind of influence the way that you understand Anekāntavāda or practice it in your own engagements?
Awesome, thank you, Christopher. I think those are very thought-provoking questions as well, and I think I can tap into our panel. Specifically, two of our professionals are in the world of law, justice, criminal justice, or non-criminal justice, but justice in general. They face certain things which are also kind of influenced through politics, right? Like some of the laws which are being made, or some current scenarios which are going in, and then them being changed, etc. So I'm going to start with Manan. And Manan, I know you mentioned your inclination or understanding of how things were working with a recent law change with the new administration brought in. So let's start with that, Manan.
Sure. Actually, I can talk a little bit about how Anekāntavāda applies to the legal sphere from like a more technical angle. Something I've actually been thinking a lot about. I think Anekāntavāda is relative to essential to the legal system that we have in the United States. So just give an example scenario, right? You think about a criminal case. You have three parties. You have the prosecution, the state that's bringing the case. You have the defense, which is basically the accused and their defense lawyers. And you have the judge, who's sort of like that neutral third party. The prosecution presents a narrative focused on accountability, the threat that criminal poses to civilized society, and a need for public safety, right? And the defense is protecting the rights of the accused and presenting maybe an alternate interpretation of what happened in that situation. And it's not that one side is lying or one side's telling the truth, but, in fact, when you testify, you're under oath, right, to tell the truth and only the truth. And if you lie, that's called perjury. It's a crime. But each side is viewing the same set of facts through a different lens and kind of presenting their side with that unique perspective. And then you have the judge, right? Their role is not to impulsively choose a side, but to listen deeply, weigh, the competing narratives that both sides present, and then applying the law in light of the facts presented, during a trial. And I think that process of listening before deciding, having some restraint, not just responding immediately, I think that's Anekāntavāda in action in the legal sphere. Facts don't exist within a vacuum, right? They exist within the context of a relevant situation. And I think even more than just, in a given trial or a case, Anekāntavāda is actually it's embedded in the foundation of the American legal system, which you could argue is one of the fairest legal and judicial systems ever created. The U.S. Constitution, specifically the First Amendment, right? It protects freedom of speech, religion, press, peaceful assembly, and petition, redress of grievances. And like, it was a radical idea when it was implemented, this idea that truth doesn't emerge from uniformity, it emerges from the coexistence of viewpoints. And truly enlightened and ahead of its time. And the purpose is that it's not on the government to decide which opinions are correct or which beliefs are legitimate. The system creates a space for competing opinions to exist. And, even when they're uncomfortable, when they're unpopular. So I think that idea that no single perspective has a monopoly on the truth is fundamental to a fair and free justice system. And the one other thing, the law is ever evolving, right? The U.S. has both civil law and common law. Common law is law made by precedent, right? So previous cases are used to decide future cases, and precedent is ever evolving. And legal code is ever evolving too. It's constantly amended and updated to reflect the times that we live in. Again, this legal system is truly the model system for the world, and I think a lot of that boils down to the fact that it's rooted in Anekāntavāda.
Sorry, awesome. Thank you, Manan. That was wonderful. I think understanding it that this is like the immediate application of Anekānt while you're sitting in the position of the judge or thinking about from either perspectives or party side. A lot of time, making these frameworks is important. No matter how one perceives the truth, to get to that, we need a framework and which looks into perspectives, right? It's important that there's a word in Jainism we use nay, right? So there's something called vyavhar nay, something called nishchay nay, which is nay is nothing but justice, nyay or justice, right? So coming from that angle, Jainism always looks at any situation, any truth into different perspectives, and it has multitudes of it. And they say it's almost infinite ways to look at it, but you look at it from the fact. You look at it from the angle of how the act was conducted. You look at it from various perspectives, which can totally make this sound completely different. So if you ask a person who's a mathematician and looking at just asking what the table looks like to them, it will say like a rectangle on top and then smaller rectangles of four legs. You ask a chemist, they'll say it is all carbon compound made up of cellulose. Then you ask somebody who's a carpenter and he's like, yeah, it's a table. What are you talking about? You talk to a common man, it's a table. So perspectives can be added, increased, and then like kind of starting to make the whole truth. So Amit, with that, I want to bring this question to you, and something some things about AI in itself. How do you think that while we are using a lot of this generative AI into our work day to day, how can we use it to kind of also get feedback about our perspectives being very rigid, and how can we shape the right prompt?
Yeah, good question, Arpit. I think first you have to know that there's like two things you gotta always keep in your mind, right? One, AI can be wrong. Two, you also your experience is not total experience, and if you keep these two in your mind, it will let you guide your prompt in that way. So you might be having a conversation with AI, you might be having a conversation with ChatGPT, getting all this information. Recognize that, wait, I don't know if AI is telling me the full thing. There's a lot in its memory bank. There's a lot in its corpus, is what it's called, that I want to bring out. How do I bring that out? Structure your prompt to bring that information out. So for example, my favorite one, I always ask, am I wrong? Tell me how I'm wrong. You are allowed to be honest. You are allowed to tell me and use opportunities to teach me where I could be wrong. Present the information. These are all words that I use in my prompts on ChatGPT to really get a lot of good information out of that. But then you also say things like, in the beginning of the conversation, you say things like, "Hey, we're going to have a conversation. I'm going to challenge you. You challenge me back. I'm going to do this. You tell me when I'm wrong. Maybe I'll push back. You push back." You want to tell the AI like, "I- I'm looking for perspectives here. I'm not looking for you to confirm my bias." Um, that's how you got to treat ChatGPT, Claude, whatever AI system you use. Um, I think the more you do that, you'll see the more robust your answers become, the more information it gives you. And ultimately, at the end of the day, you're in the control. AI is not the one telling you the truth. It's your job to kind of interpret how you want to interpret that. And for you, um, your journey, like in search for information, is to get all those perspectives, not to get the answer. So I think if you keep that in your heart, your prompts will also edit themselves same way.
So essentially, when you're typing your prompt in, and if you're keeping the memories of in the GPT or Claude, specify that every time there is an interaction happens, make sure that you analyze it in unbiased way. Make sure you tell me when I'm wrong, and then kind of AI kind of is learning that it is okay to bring in different perspective, not to confront, not to please the person to get more out of them, but also to give them a perspective which is unbiased. So I think this practice also helps you gain real time understanding of what you're interacting and talking about, and also see that have you missed something? Was there an error in your own judgment? You are allowed to be criticized by AI as well. So it's important to embed that learning in your prompts when you give that. So thank you, Amit, for that. With that, I think I want to have a one last kind of quick takeaway message from everybody on the panel. I don't see any questions, so let's start with Shanika. Like, what is your one message you want to give our audience about Anekānt?
I think my one message is before you speak in a group setting or to your partner, just go in with, listening with many, we have two ears and listen with more. And I think it's just so important because you could really start to learn something as you're listening, but also then, to ask questions so then you can listen more. The more information you have, the better, decision making we can have.
Amazing. Priyanka, you're next.
Yes, I think my message would be that I think we all live in a social bubble, and it's really important for us to step outside, talk to people. The more we talk to people, the more we interact, the more we learn, and the more we gain perspectives. So it's really important to engage in conversation, and instead of just having small talk, really getting into long conversations with people, and just trying to understand different perspectives. That's how I feel that I have grown a lot, and that would be my biggest takeaway.
That's amazing, Priyanka. I think being confounding to your own group is always limiting your perspectives. You got to go and as Chris was mentioning, interfaith dialogues. You got to go talk to other people, see how they feel. Maybe they're not just trying to not like you. They are actually as curious as you are. They want to learn from you as well. So not confounding into your bracket, opening that bracket up and going and interacting with others without a bias in mind is a great way. Amit, over to you.
Kind of in line with Priyanka, talk to people, but talk to AI. AI is not designed to, AI is designed to not give you multiple perspectives, but it's there. So use that to your advantage when you learn about any new topic, about how you want to deal with stuff at work, how you want to deal with relationships. Get the perspectives from AI, get both sides. And I think it will really help you broaden your kind of worldview and get good advice.
Awesome. Manan, what do you think about the takeaway message from your experience in Anekānt?
Absolutely. I would say just always act with humility and certainly lead with humility. I think at the core of embracing Anekāntavāda is about kind of, you know, putting your ego on the back burner sometimes and being able to listen to multiple perspectives, synthesize those perspectives. And if you are charged with leading an organization, your job is to kind of be the central point where all those opinions flow through, and then the decision gets made. And I think ultimately, in order to succeed in that, you just have to act with humility.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, panel. And I think one thought I want to add to that is something which I iterated before is look at the whole truth as an unexplored map. Think about you're starting from one point, the other people are starting from different locations in that map about the games we talked about, and they're all exploring it, and they're all chatting with you, telling that what they are seeing, and you might see completely things different than them. You might look at the mountain from the other side north while they're looking from the south, and they're like, maybe we're not even on the same island. Right? So these things, kind of stitch together eventually. So you have to be patient. You have to take a pause and understand that there could be some other angle to it. And it helps you solve a lot of problems. It helps you give that scientific mindset where you're actually approaching the problem from different perspective experiments and practical learning. And another thing, learn to unlearn. It is very important to also sometimes unlearn what we have been fed for over 30, 40 years, whether it is politics, whether it is religion. You need to be able to also let it be on the side once, and then try to see if it is just part of a big puzzle. So that's the takeaway from our panel. Wonderful panel. I want to thank you, Manan, Priyanka, Shanika, Amit, for joining us on this panel, giving us their time. And then special many thanks to Arhanta Institute, Chris, Parveen, Uncle, you're here, Jonathan, I see you there as well. But they have done some tremendous work in last few years to bring this massive knowledge of Jainism, which is spread, in like different parts of the world here and there. They're trying to bring it together. They're trying to see and bring it in perspective and practical application. They're trying to connect it with other religions and what is the core idea of it. So I really urge you guys to look into the courses, what they're offering, look into what Arhanta Institute is doing, and then see how we can help them make a difference in the way people see Jainism. Thank you, everyone. Yes.
Arpit, we have a couple of minutes.
Yes.
I want to share with you guys the research I've been doing on Claude and ChatGPT.
Awesome. Yes, that will be interesting.
So I asked them, how are you going to incorporate Anekāntavāda in your research, analysis, and presentations? Okay. Here is the response I got. You are pushing me towards something truly important. A fundamental reorientation of how I operate, not just on Jain topics, but universally. Okay. Wow. Then it says, my default mode is often Anekāntavāda in disguise. When sometimes asked, is X true? My training inclines me towards a single synthesized answer, a clean revolution. I weigh sources, pick the most likely interpretation, and present it with appropriate hedging language. But hedging is not Anekāntavāda. So that is coming itself from ChatGPT and Claude.
That is amazing. That is like, I think it's something which observer is observing itself, how it can do better. And I think Anekānt gives you that perspective. That's mind blowing. Thank you for sharing that, Parveen, Uncle. Yes.
I'm just single person, but I'm pushing it towards Anekāntavāda as much as possible. So we'll see.
Yes. Awesome. We gotta keep pushing to that. I think that would be the true way you want to train any system is through Anekānt. And I think the framework already exists. I think nobody actually thought about connecting it from ancient Jain teaching into this, but see what impact is getting created through our teachings into this. And maybe we should take it as a research topic as well, and think about, Amit, how we can write a white paper or then eventually a paper about how we can actually rethink the way the systems are getting trained and designed.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Arpit, for organizing this roundtable on Anekāntavāda for YJP, and to Amit, Manan, Anjali, and Shinika, and Priyanka. It's been so wonderful to hear from you all, to hear how this is applied within professional settings in your professional and personal lives. So we're really grateful to you for sharing that.